Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Transformed You. We are going to get into part 2 of addressing your questions on the subject of loving yourself. What does that mean to love yourself the way that God loves you? How to process that out. I'm your host, Mark DeJesus, here with my amazing, lovely, outstanding wife, Melissa, and we're glad to be with you today. Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Are you ready to do this?
I am. We got some great other questions to tackle today, so I'm excited.
3 main ones that we're going to be looking at,
Yeah.
and Lord willing.
These are good. These are good ones.
Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll get to that. So we want to jump right into it. Pray that this is a blessing to your life and to your journey.
Yeah.
Again, we are basing this on the subject, which is also found in my book, God Loves Me and I Love Myself. You can get a copy of that today. You can go to markdejesus.com, take advantage of that, and help explain, give you a grounded journey and a balanced journey on what it means to overcome the resistance to loving yourself.
Yeah.
So the first question has to do with parenting, and I'm going to set the runway.
Okay.
And you go for it, because I know that you have some great things to say about this. And then I'm going to jump in and add to it. How do you love yourself when you have a special needs child?
Well.
So where do you begin? So
Okay.
let's start with from a mom's perspective.
From a
What have
mom's
you learned?
perspective?
We have a son on the autism spectrum. We've had a number of issues to work through and understand. What does it look like to love yourself in that journey? Taking into mind the various needs, special needs kids that are out there.
Right. There is a spectrum of needs as to how much you have to, be with your child, take care of your child. So we are speaking to it from our own experience and what we've been through with Max, who is on the autism spectrum, like Mark said, and he would be considered in a lot of ways high functioning, which I think there's so much around that too. We would go, oh, he looks normal, he's high functioning, so you must be good. And
Right.
no, we've had a long journey of this. First, just even like, you asked about how does a mom love herself through this. If I could just even a little bit walk through the journey of what that has been, because it's brought us to a very core value that you and I do carry, and we've had to come to on how do we deal with Max? How do we deal with just a lot of things that surround that can disrupt our life, that we have to adjust to. And from the beginning, when we first were thinking that he was even on the spectrum, you're dealing with all the emotions around that. And I think the one thing that those of you that do have special needs child can say, yep, I totally get that. You become so focused on the child. It becomes all about them. What can you do? How can you help them? Like, it literally, you have to walk through this. And I don't know that there's, everyone can give great advice and this is how you have to process it. You have to process it in your own time and your own way. But you can definitely do it better if you create a high value for how am I tending to myself? How am I recovering? How am I getting sleep? There's a lot of factors that come into that. For the first 8 years of his life, we didn't sleep. I didn't sleep. There was a lot surrounding that. So I think that, the journey is yours. It's unique to you because it's unique to your child and what you're dealing with. But we have so many scenarios that led us to this one thing, and I'll say it in a second, that we had to confront and deal with because all of our energy was being sapped. Our emotional energy, physical energy, just everything was being sapped in dealing with Max. And you said this, and it was very poignant to our journey with him. And it can be applied to the mom journey, the dad journey, but really has to be applied to a family as a whole. And it is this: you really should only do what you can handle. And if it is for that day or for a moment, right? That is something that we have really had to, and you can feel guilty, right? Like, you can feel guilty about that statement because you think, well, we should be doing more. We should be doing this. We should be doing that. And it's really confronting all of those things, because in the midst of our journey with Max, even as a family, I think this can apply, because you can get so caught up in so many things. you lose yourself. You can lose yourself, you can lose sanity, you can lose peace, and it all centers back to that. Okay, in what I can handle today is how can I love myself the best? Because there's other questions around that, don't you think? So it even looking at this question to think about the preparation of it and how I would even answer it, it literally made me reflect on all of the crazy things that we've been through. And I know for me as a mom, when he was young, there were things that I thought, I need to go do this. I need to go do what, and in my mind, I'm going to say this, the normal moms are doing. They're hanging out. They're having play dates. Those things are not easy for me. They're not. Simply because my entire energy has to be put on what is this kid doing? What is he up to? So I one time, this was, gosh, how old was he? Probably six or seven, I want to say. Maybe, I think he was about 6. And friends of mine who had this big, gorgeous house, I've known them literally since I was in elementary school. We're having this like open house thing in the fall and inviting all the people they knew to come by, have, like a brunch thing and bring your kids and let them play and all that stuff. So I'm going to take the kids and I'm going to do this, right? No, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be normal and I'm going to connect with all the other normal people and we're going to have normal conversations and I literally walked into the situation thinking, I'm going to be stressed. I am going to be normal today. I'm going to be stress-free because they're loving people too. And I'm going to be like, okay, and I keep saying normal. So it was chaos from start to finish. When I say chaos, like at one point during all of this, not only was Max acting whack, but Abby was upstairs eating nail polish in the person's house. So I think she was like 3 because if Max was 6, so yeah, she was probably 4. She was eating nail polish. Like every insane thing happened. So while I'm trying to deal with Abby, I'm thinking, okay, Max is fine. I'm just going to deal with Abby. I go downstairs and Max is on the lap of a man in the kitchen who he does not know. And he's eating donuts and Danishes. Like, it was the most insane. And I can see this guy kind of like just trying to be nice.
Right. Like, who's this kid?
Who is this kid? Okay. Yeah. When I said that was just a snippet. At one point, the guy's house there, he's a pilot. And he has these gorgeous wooden model airplanes up in his study. Okay. It's gorgeous. I'm trying to be normal and have a normal conversation with another parent. And I'm like, wait a minute, I got to go find him. He's in their study. This is a true story. Trying to climb the bookshelf to get to the model, like every crazy thing. So anyways, I could go on with stories of that day. I decided I got to go. I can't do this. I can't be normal, right? I can't. I get him. I get in the car. I'm not even going down the driveway. I don't know if you remember that day. I called you.
Yeah, I do remember.
I called you. I could actually go into hysterics because in the recall of it, I have had to love myself in the memory of that and say, you know what? You're okay. Like I could bawl my eyes out right now thinking about it. You're okay. You made it. Because I was sobbing so uncontrollably. I felt so out of control, so unloved, so crazy. My lack of peace was, everything.
Shame, too.
Shame
like
was
the embarrassment.
Huge. And I think when I recall the memory of that day, that's probably one of the highlighting factors is now no one shamed me.
Right. Because most people are like, it's just a kid doing whatever.
Actually, to be honest with you, the more shameful moment is when Abby was eating the nail polish. And she literally had it all over. It was so crazy. And I looked at one of the mothers and I went, what am I going to do? If I have to take her to the hospital and she's I don't know what to do. And the mother looked at me like,
you're just trying to stay calm.
I'm just trying to stay calm to not feel crazy because the stuff with Max was 100 times. And I bring that scenario up. We have many more. We got kicked out of Six Flags water park because of Max. Okay? Yeah. You name it, we have been through it. and shamed because the lifeguard at the water park was like, we tried to say, listen, he has autism. We're trying to work with him. And he was like, I don't care. Get him out of here.
Right.
And it was so insane when you're thinking they'll work with you. When you just say, listen, he has autism. We're trying to give him, like, we're trying to let him go up to the top and come back down. Meanwhile, he's cutting everybody in line. He's not listening to, like, it was crazy. He's coming down backwards. He's getting yelled at. So
that was a tough day.
That was tough. Like, even as I talk about it, I can feel this tightening in my chest, and I have to kind of pull from my tool chest of loving myself and saying that it's okay. We don't have the normal family. Like, we don't have it. Not that there's, everyone can say, well, no family's normal. I actually want to punch people when they say that, because it's like, no, you kind of do. Like, you don't know my story. You don't know my scenario, and you don't know what I deal with, because there are intricacies. We explained this to good friends of ours not that long ago. We were talking about being in a church service and what goes on with Max, because they were like, wow, he looks like he did great, And we went into what we are fielding and what we are dealing with in service that maybe they don't see or other people don't see, that make you crazy, where you can't focus. And now put that in church, put it in a social scenario, in anything, is happening at any minute with him. And really the stress that we have over all that stuff. So I lay all that out first to then answer the question, okay?
Well, that starts to answer it. It really does, because it puts it in a place of perspective, because when you're first parenting, you have your idea of what parenting should look like.
Right.
Which is usually not the right expectation. Like, all our expectations usually get challenged in so many different ways, right? You think, first you think marriage is going to be like this, and then it's not.
Right.
And you got to work through and understand all the growth that's needed. Then parenting brings you to a whole new level of growth where God's working on you. I think that parenting is really a lot more about God working on you versus what we typically think it's like you said, about the kid. Even people without special needs children, we get so absorbed in the parenting. It's really about God working in us and bringing that to our relationship with our child.
Yeah. And
so then what it leads us all to is we're all insecure in certain areas. We have vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we compare. So we think well, our family should be like, and that I think is a challenge, because we would go, well, we should go to this social event. And then you feel like guilt that if I go to that, I wouldn't spend one moment actually connecting to any person.
No,
I would
don't.
just be manning Max.
Right.
And if it's an event that's, child related, then I'm there to just help him and to maneuver with him, but I'm not going to do much, connecting.
Right.
So I'm going to have to find other ways to do that.
Right.
To connect. And then I felt like years and years and years, and there's still parts of it I'm filtering out, of understanding this is the world that we live in, and here's what we can handle. And I think people with special needs children need to understand that. When you say loving yourself, what does that look like? It means having an understanding perspective of where you're at. There's certain things that you go, we just can't do that.
Yeah.
Or maybe even saying, we just can't do that right now. Maybe as things change, or there might be certain physical limitations, certain emotional limitations, certain things that you just go, yeah, it's okay for me. For example, there are plenty of times people go, hey, come over for dinner.
You can bring your kids if you want.
And yeah, bring kids, and it's like, yeah, we wouldn't socialize with you, and it wouldn't be fun for us.
No, it
because there's things where he appears that he can do fine, and he can. We're not making it out. We don't want to make it worse than it seems, but there's certain little things that can really go awry
very quick. Like, you think he's in the
unexpected.
bathroom. Like,
unexpected
washing
things.
hands can turn into, he had a thought. He wants to make a boat, and he's going to fill the sink up with water, and the water's going everywhere, and he's using tissues and shoving them. Like, it can go awry so fast.
So an example that comes to my mind is about a month, or we live in North Carolina. We have a new place, a home we live in now. wonderful home. We have a creek that comes along the side of it, and it's actually where the water in our area floods to whenever there's heavy rainstorms. And so we've learned quickly that creek fills up really fast and really high. And during one of them, in fact, my parents were here visiting, and they were like, wow, there's a lot of rain going on here. Well, anyways, as I was out just checking the drainage, making sure everything's okay.
We're in the front yard, yeah.
Yeah. And Max went out in the backyard, and he was over towards the creek, which is fine. But then at some point, his crock slipped off.
He got stuck in the mud, and the crock went in the right.
So one of the struggles that he has is he gets obsessive. Yeah. So he was obsessed about getting his crock back. Meanwhile, the water's rising and it's moving very fast and very heavy. Actually, I think fortunately our neighbor screamed out, and he was
screaming at Max to get
out, and he came back.
The thing though, Max didn't listen to him. Max was totally focused on the crock,
right?
And then Abby came running to me in the front. Mom, Max,
right?
And her and the neighbor girl were crying because they were scared because they heard the neighbor screaming, and Max could not get. I mean, it was you. So I had to get very firm, get him, pull him, and which then you start spinning. The neighbor thinks we're crazy. The kid, like you just to get Max away from the creek. It was in a very dangerous spot. Like, thank God.
So this is a great example because what you said, the neighbor thinks we're crazy. You have to release yourself of understanding. Number one, like you said, we're not necessarily like everybody else. This is what we can handle. And I think that a great piece of advice is you don't have to over-explain yourself to everyone. Because
true.
In those moments, you're like, you
I start thinking I want to wear a headband that says...
Right, that's the reason I'm laughing. The reason I'm laughing is I kind of have this script. Hi, my name's Mark DeJesus. I have this son, he's got this, and he does this.
Which I've gone through that when we're on the playgrounds, and I've had a mom be weird to me because Max says things very black and white, and I'm like, listen, you need to understand. And I've had people say, you know what, thank you for telling me.
Okay? And other times...
people, you just get a dead blank stare, and people are rude or weird and whatever.
Right. So I think the need to not... Like, for example, the person sending this question, maybe you have certain expectations of family members or other people that are like, hey, why don't you do this? And in your mind, you're like, man, I'd love to.
But I can't.
But I just can't in certain ways. So there's an aspect of true acceptance for where you're at. Like, here's where we're at. And it's okay that, I'm okay. And then tune into what is God saying that might be the one thing that could stretch you. And so maybe it's you can't do that, but what about this?
Right. And most of the time I would say too, in regards to loving yourself, that's patience and understanding. That's a massive part of loving yourself. As you're saying that, it's just making me think about that. Because we're talking a lot about what we can handle, what we can. That's a massive part of loving yourself when you have a special needs kid.
Yeah.
What is that to try to get your peace as much as possible? Because within that, then you can make better decisions. Within that, you go, okay, I can tune into wisdom. Where I've had to say to you, I'm going to collapse, and you're like, okay, you have to. What can you do right now that you can either take a break from, do this, do that, and it's hard. It's really hard.
You have to manage your energy as best you can. As a parent already, those of you watching this, you have to, you're like, oh man, I'm tired all the time.
Right.
You really have to watch over your energy and be aware of how much am I doing. It's actually helped me, this area has helped me to understand what's really, really important. And not get lost in things that are just not the highest priority of what God would have over our family.
Right. That's so good.
So I think that the takeaway is really all in your heart about how you're comparing yourself, how you feel, the story you're playing. Are you putting all this unnecessary pressure, or because there is no perfect playbook for this.
Right. There isn't.
But I feel that my best gift to my children is to bring the best state of mind and state of heart to them in my interaction with them. That if I'm irritated and I feel like I'm getting snippy, it's not just about what they're doing. I need to go, I'm not in the best state. Let me get myself into a better state. Am I manifesting a mindset issue or a lack of sleep issue? You know, I think that caring for yourself in the best way possible and what you eat, like, don't go because I'm caring for this child, you just let your nutrition just go off the rails.
Right.
Whatever, I'm just stressed out. That stuff needs to be paid attention to, because then it disempowers your state in your parenting. Like, the better I'm caring for me, it's going to model, and it is very, very tough, because some special needs kids,
it's very hard. Yeah.
You know, we've seen further along the spectrum that
especially when you have a child that, you know, even when we went to that autism event, and sometimes it's good to get out and see those, you know, what other people are dealing with too, because then you can go, okay, you know, it helps to sometimes put your own life in perspective. And there are very, very gut-wrenching scenarios of kids that you can't even get your child to look at you.
Right.
And when you're talking even, you know, more low-functioning kids on the spectrum, where you're already coming from a place of deep heartbreak as a parent. God created us to all connect. And when you cannot connect to your child, there's no way to help somebody even understand what that feels like. You've had to battle that massively when you're trying to have a conversation with him, and all he cares about is, I just want pizza, because he's obsessed on pizza. I just want pizza. And he's literally like just out there.
For example, when I hurt my hand and you weren't home, Abby wasn't home, and it was kind of a two-man job to get this stump out that I had dug up. It took me a while to finally get it. So I said, you know what? Let me try to have Max help me. I tied one end, put a rope, so he'd pull the rope. And as I was pushing it up, it rolled back on my finger. I got a small fracture in my hand. Well, anyways, when it happened, I was like, oh, and the moment I knew like, okay, this is,
and if somebody else would have known, oh my gosh, what do we have to do? Right.
So I said, Max, Daddy hurt his hand. And he goes, it's kind of funny, but it's not. He goes, are you going to order pizza now? So,
that's our Max.
So I'm like, because I'm like, I don't know, did I break it? Did I, you know, I'm sitting there like holding it, kind of like I got the stump there. I'm trying to figure out. And, you know, you're in those moments of realization that if I get hurt when I'm alone with him, I still have to care for him. I'm not going to be able to go, hey, go get the phone.
Right. And he's 11. Like, he's 11. He's as tall as me. He's like 1 inch. Like, he's massive. So you're looking at this kid that still in so many ways is very much like a baby.
Right.
And that in each stage, you need to be kind to yourself, because you're processing that and acceptance, but yet grief. Yep. Acceptance, grief. You're in this toggle when you're dealing with a child that has any kind of needs. And it's okay to talk about that. It's not saying, well, I don't accept them. No. It's very okay to deal with your feelings about it.
Your own grief.
Your own grief. Yeah. And expect it right.
I don't want to end this subject without emphasizing parents who have special needs. You need to prioritize your marriage, and you will have to make extra effort than the quote unquote average parent or family that doesn't have these kind of battlegrounds. You will have to fight harder, because there's a lot of things that we can't necessarily do because of that. So we have to find creative ways to go, okay, this is what we can do as a couple to make sure we're connected, to make sure we're prioritizing our marriage. That we're developing a culture nowadays where parents are really becoming like project managers.
Right. So true.
Two project managers working on the similar project. And then it's like, once the common project's gone, meaning the kid, when they out of the house or whatever, like, what do we do now? Yeah. You know, we don't want to have that. We want to cultivate a life where even the journey of parenting Max and his issues, that we don't lose our sense of connectivity. Right. And so when we see that, like, having struggle, we monitor that. Right. When we see the other person kind of teetering out, you're getting edgy or I'm getting edgy, Thank God it's usually one or the other. It's not
Right.
both. It's
It's
not
never
always
at the
both
same
at the
time.
same time.
That's true.
If it is, it's usually a really rough day. But we look at that where I'll step in, and help. And there's a lot of things that we just can do right now. And we're not going to ignore them and then just like try to pursue whatever.
Right.
Like some family, maybe you just want to make more money to make yourself feel better, or you want to, you're pursuing some ambition. It's fine, but like don't let that be like a way to ignore your marriage, hide over the pain. No, deal with the pain.
Right.
Get your marriage even better out of what you're going through.
Absolutely.
So, anyways,
that's good. I hope that helps.
Any other thoughts?
No, I mean we could talk for hours. I think about this topic, but
So
that's good, babe.
Let's get into another aspect.
Whoa, this is another good one.
This goes into marriage. So I'll read through most of the question that relates to this. It's about men being afraid of their wives. So buckle up. But it has to do with loving yourself. You mentioned in your book, God Loves Me and I Love Myself, that men are afraid of their wives. Page 78. I can't verify that. I don't have the book in front of me, but I just do not get that. Can you expound on that? What has happened to the men of this age? They call themselves Christians, yet refuse to fight for their wives and families. What makes them fear their wives? What do we as wives do to make them afraid? I feel like the enemy has bound the men. We women are tired of leading by default.
Amen, sister.
What do we do? There is such a stronghold of passivity in men. My husband has listened to your marriage podcast, and we read the rejection mindset out loud together. Parentheses, at my suggestion. And he agrees with things, but I see no heart transformation and thus no relationship transformation. Is this tied in with being afraid of me, his wife, for such and such years? I won't say how many. I want solutions to our issues, but he refuses to take the lead in seeking solutions. I can hold my voice for days on end, and he will not even ask why. Melissa once said in your podcast that women need to hear the male voice. I so agree. I'm saying this exclamatory because they're filled with exclamation points.
Yeah.
I have a very dry bucket. What is he so afraid of? Yes, he grew up with an extremely dysfunctional home. Why does he refuse to grow or seek any kind of help? So to help answer your question, which you actually in your question helped answer most of it.
Yeah.
Because the reason I say that men are afraid of their wives is because in order to be a spiritual leader, you have to be comfortable with dealing with issues of the heart. If you're comfortable dealing with issues of the heart, you have to have a sense of self-awareness. You have to have a sense of relational vulnerability in order to share. So men are oftentimes, many times, not all, but most, have a lack of mentoring in that area, where men have not been fathered in how to deal with their emotional capacity. Yes, women have a greater emotional connectivity than the average man. It does not mean men should be completely non-emotional. I don't believe in that. I don't see that even modeled scripturally. I think the man needs to be connected to love and himself. Paul the Apostle said a man who loves his wife loves himself. So a man who doesn't love his wife well doesn't love himself. He hates himself. He struggles with self-hatred. He doesn't have a healthy view of himself. So because of that, the idea of stepping out and leading his wife, stepping out and initiating conversations is the scariest subject in the world. He would rather go out and fight in a war than do that. I'm just helping you to understand the psyche.
Right.
He'll go out, he'll work the hardest job there is out there. He'll go out and, go out and if you live in the wilderness, he'll go out and hunt an animal. But talking to you about his feelings is the scariest thing in the world. So the problem is that females will respond to this and say, what did I do to make him afraid?
Right, I was just going to say, most of you are sitting there saying, but I make the atmosphere great, I talk loving, I make it open.
It
doesn't matter.
No, well, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter.
That's not true. It does matter.
It doesn't mean that the fear will be eliminated. Okay, so
He's really afraid of himself and feeling shame and feeling that's a huge aspect of this.
Yeah.
Now, you could be afraid of a wife who is like, it's not good enough. Tell me more. What do you think? That is a product of, though, like years and years probably of like just no responses in marriage. So there are varying degrees to this. Some men are seriously afraid of their wives for other reasons of bitterness and anger and all of that stuff.
As a wife, you can definitely add to the fear factor by not being a safe person to talk to. And that just takes a sense of self-awareness between you and God. That may not be the issue. You may be a real safe landing place. But the thing about, in order for a man to be a leader, he's got to initiate. And in order to initiate effectively, you have to be vulnerable, because you're not going to lead perfectly. You're not going to so for example, many times I'll talk to men about initiating prayer with their wives, which is very scary and frightening a lot of times. And why is that? Because that prayer is a vulnerable thing. And they're like, well, I don't know how to pray. I pray by myself. Or they can pray in church, but sitting down and praying with their wives or saying, how can I pray for you? They're scared to death.
Yeah.
So what I encourage take the steps, knowing that taking a step is success, not doing it perfectly, because there is no doing it perfectly anyway. Taking the step of faith, taking the risk is success.
Yeah.
And so in it, if you say the wrong thing in your prayer, or if you try to get vulnerable and you screw up, then still celebrate that you're making movement in those territories.
Right.
And we do live in a plague where women are crying out, and they're angry, they're frustrated, they're often bitter, they're in a very discouraged place where they want their man to lead more, and they're carrying a load that they don't want to carry.
Yeah.
And they're like, he could tell me I'm controlling. I don't want to be controlling. I don't want to come across controlling. But bro, somebody's got to take the wheel.
Right.
And you can't just sing Jesus take the wheel. You got to actually
Which I love to say that.
which you got to actually step up. So he's afraid. The fear is preventing him from taking any steps. Now, because in his conditioning, shame has conditioned men that if you take a step and you make a mistake, whatever that means, or you don't do it right, that is failure. And when you have a failure, you are a failure. Not, hey, I did it and I stepped out and I tried, it's great. It's no, you failed, you are a failure. And that is one of his deepest feelings he wants to avoid. So he covers it up in a den of passivity. And I call it a den because it's like a bear going into hibernation.
Yeah.
He's emotionally isolated. So he comes home, reads the paper. Well, we don't really read the paper anymore. So he gets on his phone, he watches the game, and it's understandable because there are certain aspects of watching the game where you're decompressing from work, but then there's no emotional connection. So then the wife, it's like tick 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 tick, boom. You kind of your anger comes out in him because you're like, I held my voice and you don't even ask me how I'm doing. You know, I could be stage 3 cancer. Is there? What's it?
I think there is.
I
think there's a 4. So there should be a 3
stage 4. That's what I meant. Stage 4 cancer, and you wouldn't even know, right? And then if you push and push and push, what comes out of him is a manifestation of anger. Because you triggered his failure, right? I work hard every day. I do everything I can. And he'll just kind of point at things. At this point, he's now operating in Adam's mode, Adam in the garden, where Adam goes, it's the woman you gave me.
Right.
So he's like,
hey now.
He's got the guns.
Right.
One's pointed at God. The other one's pointed at his wife.
Right.
It's the woman. And by the way, it's the one you gave me, God. Shame and fear are upon him. So in my work with men, what my goal is to reestablish the power of confidence, because he doesn't have in him just yet. He has it in him, but he hasn't activated it. The ability to step out of the boat and walk on water, take the risk, and let God be with you, because he doesn't have patterns of that in his life. David was able to face Goliath because he had a history of killing the lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. So that history gave him a reference for how to deal with the bigger giant. The problem is we haven't dealt with the smaller giants in our life.
Yeah.
So just having a conversation is frustrating. Or you can have a conversation at work, but just sitting down and talking to your wife kicks up a lot of stuff. And marriage is the number one place where God works his sanctifying power, and he's growing us and maturing us like never before. And then that's level 1 maturing. Level 2 maturing is in your parenting. It's a setup. You think it's all about your sweet, cute little kid, and they become teenagers, and you're like, who's this monster? No, it's really about you growing in relational connection.
Right.
Because there's things you haven't cultivated that now you need to cultivate,
Yeah.
right? So I say all that to say that then in his anger, if he's lashing out, he goes into a self-pity. I'm paying all the bills. I do all these things. So then your need actually gets turned, and it's all about him now. And so then he's protecting. So the pride's protecting. The pride's a mechanism that's pushing back. So this is all a sign he doesn't love himself. This is why loving yourself is important, because whether you love yourself or not, comes out in the moments of discomfort. It comes out in the moments of mistakes, failures, relational wounds, hurts, offenses, where even for me, it's like if I do something in our marriage, I make an attempt and maybe it doesn't land for you, it wants to trigger that
Forget it. Right.
Forget it, hopelessness, contempt of myself.
Yeah.
Looking down upon myself, even not letting it go, or just fixating on, oh, I should have done it this way. And loving myself in that moment goes, you know what? Just keep loving her and love her and learn to love her in a way that she needs to learn to be loved. So the only way I find a man will change is a divine spark from the Spirit of God. And what I can say to a lot of wives is do your best to stay out of God's way and not hinder what God is doing. And
right. I wouldn't recommend going, I finally figured it out, you don't love yourself. I watched Mark DeJesus, and you don't love yourself. It is, in a lot of ways, it's very difficult, and we've gotten to the point where we really actually don't even like doing marriage counseling anymore because, unfortunately, one usually wants it. We're just talking straight. One wants it way more than the other does as far as what it takes.
Yeah, it's not
saying they don't love the other person, but go ahead.
Well, if I could just translate a little bit what you're saying. It's not that we don't want to do any marital work. It's just the marital work of one wanting it and the other one not wanting it.
Exactly.
Now you're like,
it's
like you're driving and the clutch is stuck. It's like,
right.
And you can hit the gas as much as you want, but it's like until the other person goes, yeah, I want it too, then the gears will click into gear. But I think that this is crucial because marriages are struggling. So I think practically, if I'm in your shoes, this is practical because I know sometimes we're looking at suggestions. You're like, we're watching the podcast and reading the book out loud together.
Which first of all, that's awesome.
You're saying it's at my suggestion. If he's willing to do it.
That's awesome. Most people won't even get to that stage.
Right.
Yeah.
Work with what you've got to celebrate, because I feel like that's ground, because they're willing. And my goal would be, how does this make you feel? Try to get language communication. Well, how does that make you feel? What was your experience like? What does this make you think of? And so then, because what you're doing is you're stirring the things of the heart. Yeah. And I could go into a whole bunch of other areas. But I think that there's a divine work of the Holy Spirit. And I'll use the scripture that Peter gave. We talked about a woman who has a man who's not a believer. And he said, by your chaste behavior, he not with a word. In other words, it's not necessarily with you like preaching at him, but by your chaste behavior. And I think sometimes we diminish that because we're in a battle of the sexes. Yeah. So we don't like talking about the men and women roles in biblical ways anymore. It's like, it's awkward and we're trying to like over explain it. And the Bible's like, this is an empowered posture of a woman here, saying that there's a power flowing through you and him seeing a manifestation of you changing. So it's like, it gives you freedom that like fixing your husband's not your job.
It's not.
So be released of that.
Right.
2, your behavior and your transformative manifestation, not you running out and being busy because your husband's not the spiritual leader. So you're going to go now attend 15 women's conferences and go be busy in this. And now you're not home because that's going to add to his resentment,
Right.
because the
Now
Christ,
you're making
the
sure-
Christ you're representing is not something he really wants to be a part of. Right. So you got to ground yourself a bit and go, how can we, cultivate relationship? And so if you go, hey, I'm reminding him, hey, let's read, because he's not necessarily going, hey, when I get home, we're going to read that book, but he's willing to do it. And if you have to remind him, do it, but do it in a way where it's not your responsibility to lead him, to have to fix him. You're being a sister in Christ. Because even, let's take our roles in husband and wife out of the picture. We're brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I'm your brother in Christ.
Right.
So sometimes we just need to simplify things and go, I'm not responsible for your every thought and your every decision and action, but I'm responsible to you to love you. And so if this is what we can do right now, I'm going to go, hey, let's do it. And how can we make it fun and enjoyable?
Yeah.
Because the material, a lot of it gets heavy.
Right.
Like you and I we don't dive through 10 chapters at a time and go through,
No, we have had to work really hard to have that balance of like, what kind of fun can we have right now to just decompress?
So maybe what you could also do is at times read it, and then at the next time, do something fun together. Watch a comedy, or, don't let your time spent together always be around, it's got to be deeply spiritual, because we don't do that.
No.
What we do is we kind of figure out, what do we need right now?
Totally.
What do we need? And sometimes we just need to sit and pray, or sometimes we just do. You could also at times say, be very meaningful. I've been going through some things. Could you just take a minute and just pray for me?
That will scare.
Mm-hmm. Right? And he's like,
And not in your head. That's the other thing. I have this, I get this pretty much every time I ask a woman, does your husband pray for you? Yes, he does pray in his own time, and he tells me he's praying. Okay, when he prays for you together, does he pray out loud? No.
Right.
Because they're scared to death too. And it goes back to what you're saying, with their fear of failure.
Right.
And someone's going to need to break through the uncomfortability, and they're like, can you just pray out loud and just, because, and I feel for this person.
Right.
I feel for them. We're all battling, even when you and I got married, and with all the wonderful things that you are and who you are as a husband, I still had to confront, for me, a lot of very deep father wounds and men wounds that I was projecting on you as well. That,
and same here.
Both. So,
She also answers, you answer the question, what's he so afraid of? Yes, he grew up in an extremely dysfunctional home. If you're saying he grew up in an extremely dysfunctional home, I would say there's a lot of pent up wounds that are just shoved down in his life that he hasn't had the opportunity to express. He doesn't have like a model. And so,
so in the question of why does he refuse to grow and seek any kind of help? Because there was no model. So when you grow up, I'm assuming in as writing here, extremely dysfunctional, there is zero equipping, and zero equipping means no emotional language, no connectivity, none of those things. And that has to be a decision to seek after.
I'd be
goes
careful.
back to you saying,
I'd be careful of, go ahead.
no, but the woman can't do it for him.
Right.
There is no magical statement. There isn't. And, this confronts a lot of things and can go down a lot of different tangents on why you picked why you two are together, what you were drawn to. This goes on to a lot of different veins that, the two of you as a couple can hopefully deal with down the road. Mm-hmm. But there comes that point in every person's marriage where you go, are we going to grow and go to the next level and grow old together and do this in an awesome way? Or are we just going to live as roommates? Or are we going to say, these are heavy decisions, and it's sobering. And I hate to say that this is unfortunately a pandemic problem. in most homes where men were not equipped. And we are hoping to be a piece of the puzzle that fights for that and helps that, and we're in your corner.
Yeah, and that's why we resourced a whole series. It's now like a training course on our website called Marriage for Overcomers, and we are prayerfully considering doing some next level stuff of people that want to like work on some more things. But it covers a lot more practical things about having discussions about, do we want to grow together? Asking that, and then what does that look like for us as a couple? What's the metrics? Because every couple, they're at different journeys. What does it look like for us to spiritually grow together? What are some things that would manifest?
That could be a great question to ask.
And don't make it so like complex and like you trying to be like what you think that spiritual person is over there.
Yeah.
I would be careful of saying he refuses to. He refuses to. Where's the statement?
At the very end, why does he refuse?
Yeah. Why does he refuse to grow or seek any help? That could be a disempowering story, because refusal means you can't touch it. As he really said, I refuse to never grow.
Right. Because he is at least, this is that.
Right.
Most wives cannot even get this to happen, that he's listening to the podcast and reading a book out loud. Like,
yeah, it's good. Because I think this is where I live from. I try to take wherever I am and invite God to empower the situation, because no matter what God does, he's always empowering where we're at. We get stuck by, well, I can't do da-da-da-da, or this is not happening. I try to ask, well, what can I do? He doesn't want to do such and such. What can we do?
right.
So sometimes we want to get so spiritual in our marriage, but we're not even spending time together.
Right.
Don't make the spiritual growth time the focus only,
Right.
because that's
Get back to having fun together, and let there be a progression too. You know what is good too?
We found in pretty much like 99% of marriage trouble, there is a loss or a need to enhance the heart-to-heart, eye-to-eye time of just talking.
Right.
It's either never really been there well, or it's been lost, and it needs an enhancement of just sitting down, and you're not like just, you're not necessarily just side by side doing something. You're sitting with each other and just talking.
Right. And just creating even just the simple intimacy. I know for me, because of my own personal issues, you like to hold hands. I do not.
That's great.
I don't. And I have to work through that, because that's a way that you want to connect to me. It's just like, and I'm like, oh, do we have to? I have to work through that. That's my issue. You know what I mean?
So when that first would happen, I'd go into rejection and spiral. And
this isn't about Mark and Missy.
And then I had to. Well, this explains the cycle. So then I have to go back to, it's okay, God, you love me, and we'll figure this out. I'm gonna love myself. Whereas the normal response, we forget it. She doesn't want it, and then it's like, then like despair comes in.
Wah, wah.
So it's a good example of like, take every subject. I think a lot of couples that are struggling feel like they're the only ones going through this.
Yeah, and they're not. Totally not.
Like people will go, we don't talk enough. We have a sexless marriage, or we have, we can't see eye to eye on this. It's like, right. Everybody has these, and God is going, I'm not going to take it away. I want you to face it and work through it.
You know what, too, is really good is the questions for consideration in all the books that are so good. Maybe even to stretch him. All right, we're going to individually do the questions, and then the next time we come together, it's just going to be talking through those things. You answer them on your own, I'll answer them, and then we'll come together and talk. That could be a point of stretching, too.
Right. And again, we're
just throwing stuff out.
We're talking to an imaginary husband, because we don't know what your husband's like. But we do know what men and women are like, in very common ways they have. So I want to get empowered. So I got to find a way to get empowered. So what you'll have to do is you're going to have to do some forgiveness work, because there's probably some bitterness that your husband isn't where you'd like him to be.
Yeah.
Or your husband and your wife isn't where you want her to be. And we have to let go of that expectation and accept this is where we're at. Now love is having a deeper work because we're forgiving, and then we're setting the foundation of love, which first says, I love you and I accept you where you're at right now. Okay? And for a lot of people, that's a struggle because they say, well, if I accept him, he'll never change. Well, who in the world said you were God in charge of the change? And if you hold on to it, then the person's going to change. You are not the God of transformation.
Right.
God is. And we think that little myth, right? So it's like, that's
So
where that person's
true.
at. Because then you get out of codependency, which is tying your self-worth to how they're doing in that particular day, right? Which everybody needs to unwind from. Every Christian should at some point go through a codependency workshop because there's so many levels of it. But okay, so we're talking a lot of different ways. We know this is a serious issue. And but those are some things that I think, get a vision for your husband that's God's giving you, and then go, what can I do? And God, I invite you to grow me in this so that if he never changes or if she never changes, you'll keep growing me and I will keep discovering the greater depths of maturity that I can have. And then you start making your decisions from there. So anyways, I'm sure we solved all your issues and everything.
That's good.
Let's do one more.
Really?
And then we'll because it ties in.
You're right. Okay.
It has to do with loving yourself and intimacy. Do you think folks who have a hard time loving themselves the way God does and accepting themselves have a problem with intimacy? Yes. Yes, 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 yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes, yes.
It.
Withdrawing, cutting off, unforgiveness, helplessness. Yes, all four of those that you put in there: withdrawing, cutting off, unforgiveness, helplessness. With friends, family, romantic relationships, yes. Now, I'm not sure in what directions you're thinking in your head and in your mind, but I'll just kind of lay out a couple things. If you want to enhance your relationships with your friends, with your family, with marriages, loving yourself is the greatest step to do it because it clears your vision of what needs to happen next. People tend to get lost in either like the bitterness and agitation over the relationship, or we get lost in trying to something we need to do to fix it. Isn't that
100%.
right? So in trying to fix it, guilt is a driving factor. Well, guilt keeps you from loving yourself right. And we think of guilt as like the Holy Spirit, and it's really not. It's codependent yuck and our family ties and junk and all that we need to break those ungodly ties. And loving yourself the way God loves you gives you clarity on how to love the person without putting all these expectations that they need to do something. It's like, they can't love me the way that I need, so I got to accept that, right? So in marriage, if you want true intimacy, emotionally and even sexually, you working on loving yourself is the key. And I know, like, even for females, because many females, even in sexual intimacy, when they're not loving themselves, that drops.
Right.
Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Men can tend to, when they're not loving themselves, when they're loving themselves and not loving themselves, the libido can go up, right? In one sense, he feels great about his life and himself, and he brings that to his wife. Right. In the other situation, he's needy and he needs that sexual intimacy to fix that need in his heart, right? So he has to be discerning over time. Okay, God,
hopefully,
what's going on here? But for a female, I've found a lot of times that drops, or she'll be very tempted in other capacities. Women are growingly looking for at sexual addictions, pornography, things like that, for filling those places, or dreaming about some guy that seems to be the perfect guy, fantasy world, so forth. But a lot of times, her even her sexual drive can come out of how
she feels about herself. Absolutely.
100%. What you see when you're looking in the mirror, or how you talk to yourself, your self-talk, all those kinds of things. So intimacy with God, same thing. If you're learning to receive that love from him, realize how much he loves you, tune into that, give that to yourself, relating to God, is because now you're reflecting back to him what he gave you. So therefore, you're hearing him better.
Right.
So God is a loving father who loves you as a son or daughter. In my case, as a son. So when I receive that, I see myself the way that he sees me, and I mirror back to him a reflection of what he has shown me, which now creates a beautiful interaction because I'm talking to him out of the frequency of who he really is. When I'm in self-hatred, you just hate my life, and God, where are you? And really, like, you brought me to this point, and why can't we? And I'm sick of, and look at who, and what am I doing? Now, he's not gonna like throw me off a cliff and send me to hell. Thank God for his mercy. But it doesn't break through. You know, I've said the saying, we've all read the prayers of David where he says, God, why have you not forsaken me? But those are not the prayers we hang over our toilet.
Right. Why have you forsaken me? Right. Right. They're not right.
Or wherever, you know? It seems like everybody has like verses over their toilet.
Yeah, it's usually the footprint. And that's not a real verse, but
The footprints?
the footprints poem or thing. Yeah.
You know? So, okay, so it's okay to say, my God, you know, why have you forsaken me? You know, or where are you? It's okay to be honest, but don't end the conversation there.
Well, an honest son or daughter can say those things and still know they're safe and okay.
Right.
So,
and
see,
know,
it's
God, you're
confronting-
faithful.
Right.
And know, God, you're faithful, but right now I'm struggling to connect to that.
Correct.
And I'm being honest right now. But I find, forgive me if I interrupted you,
No,
your
it's all
flow,
right.
but I had like three thoughts collide at the same time. But it's in that moment where I go, okay, I feel this. My rule of thumb is when I express that honest frustration with God, I just don't end it there. I kind of like sit in it for a little bit and let him meet me so I can connect to my sonship. So the loving yourself helps you in that, because if I get honest, loving myself in that moment means it's okay that I'm not okay, because I need to figure this out. And then I get mad because I'm like, but I've been this way before, and I'm sick of this, and I've dealt with this for 10 years. And what, right? And it's like, it's all right. It's all right. And then the clarity comes.
Right. I was going to say, loving yourself and taking the time to let that process out and work that out 100% helps you in clarity of relationship, how to make decisions, where to engage, to really start seeing things from a higher spiritual dimension too, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to intimacy. All right, what's happening right now? Why am I pushing my spouse away from me? What's going on inside of me? Sure, they could be being a jerk. I'm not saying that, but we have to first go, okay, what's going on inside of me?
Yep.
And raising that bar on how you love yourself affects literally everything. Everything.
One last thought that helps me. When you don't love yourself, you can't face what you need to face.
So true.
To change. So if you have a lot of relationships where you're withdrawing, cutting off, you're unforgiving, you feel helpless, and you probably can't see the problem that's going on, the pattern that you have, because you're in defense mode. And when you don't love yourself, it's like all these people, if they would just all get their act together, you know, we kind of just start pointing the finger. We get in accusation mode. Yeah. When you love yourself, you create a safety within your heart to go, you know what? I get victim-y in a lot of relationships, or I make it all about me, or I sabotage relationships. Yeah. When you love yourself, you start to go, you know what? There's some things I could start tweaking and I could start growing in. Now you have an honest dialogue.
Compassion over yourself.
Right. Yeah. Now you can improve. There's no sense in trying to improve anything if you don't
have
first
self-awareness.
Yeah. And you can't have that unless you first learn to access the power of love.
It's true.
Loving acceptance is where it all starts. Then you're less defensive. And then maybe, this is the crazy part, then maybe you have some conversation where somebody could lovingly say, you know, you do kind of have this pattern that, like, you know, when I call you, you just don't call back. And, you know, and you get upset that, you know, you're not invited to parties, but you know, sometimes you're hard to get a hold of.
Right.
You know, that's high level.
That's...
Because you're just like, what? How dare you?
Right,
or we shut down and all those kinds of things. So if you think of the greatest pattern that you have, the biggest frustration you have in pattern in your life is probably the greatest area that needs the work of love, for you to love yourself and then see, okay, what's it going to take Not in like, oh, I'm such a failure and I got to do this so I can be loved. All those accusing things. Like, no, again, when you keep finding yourself doing that, go back to loving yourself.
Yeah.
Because
That's why I love your faith, hope, and love teaching. It's so good.
Yep. So I think we solved everybody's problems today. And so
I think so too.
I think that we're going to
let us know if it helped. Let us know if there's, anything you want to add.
Yeah, we really tried to just be ourselves in this in every episode.
Yeah,
and I think this is our final episode in this series.
Absolutely.
So we're going to be taking a break and coming back with another series. I'm going to use my left hand to just bring up a couple things because, and when we start our next series, my hand should be healed by then. So thank God for that. But would you take the time, please, if this has added any value to your life? We are supported by people who donate to Turning Hearts Ministries International, which is what is behind all this work that we're doing. It has been established as a work to help people experience healing, freedom, and transformation from the inside out. It helps in the articles, support the articles that get posted, the videos that we put out, all the materials that we just use to spread the word. If you haven't gotten the book, this is where you need to go. God Loves Me and I Love Myself. You can get that on markdejesus.com. It's available on Amazon, and it is available worldwide. You can get it anywhere in paperback, Kindle, and audio. People really love the audiobook version, and if you get it, you get a special little part in there where actually my kids and my family are a part of that section. Are you in it? I think you're in it.
I am.
Yeah, you and the kids jump in right at the end. So you get to check that out too. Or maybe you go, you know what? I want to support on a regular basis. We have 2 partnership channels that one is an audio resource. The other is a video resource package. And we want to just give you some equipping things for your life and your journey that can help us to partner together in walking this journey. But some things to look forward to if you're watching this live, or maybe you came to it much later. And then this stuff will already happened, but some things will be coming out. I'll be coming out with a new book in the fall about the heart healing journey. Super excited about that. We're going to be prayerfully considering what our next series is going to be about, and there's going to be a lot of video content, a lot of good stuff that we're going to be putting out together. So we pray this episode has been a blessing and a value to your life. So live healed, freed, transformed from the inside out.
You know it. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.